Everyone keeps waiting for the US-Iran standoff to resolve, through a deal, through deterrence, through exhaustion. But what if it's not heading toward resolution at all? What if it's heading toward rupture? And what if decades ago, Kuan essentially warned that this exact kind of confrontation doesn't fade away? It tightens until it snaps. Lee never governed in the Middle East. He built modern Singapore, a small state forced to survive in a harsh geopolitical neighborhood. But he thought in systems, not headlines. He believed crises aren't caused by single decisions. They're caused by structural pressures building inside geography, identity, and power balances. And when those pressures accumulate long enough, even disciplined leaders lose control of the outcome. That's the danger in the current standoff between the United States and Iran, because this isn't just about uranium enrichment. It's not just about sanctions. It's not just about proxy militias or missile tests. It's about a system that has been grinding against itself for decades. And systems under pressure eventually fracture. Iran's power does not come from its economy. It does not come from conventional military superiority. It comes from position. Look at the map. Iran sits at the center of the Persian Gulf. It borders Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And along its southern coast lies the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical energy choke points on Earth. That geography guarantees relevance. It guarantees that any confrontation with Iran cannot stay local. Kuan understood choke points instinctively. Singapore sits near the Strait of Malacca. He built his country around the idea that when you control a passage, you don't need to dominate the world. The world has to account for you. Iran sits at a similar intersection. But instead of embedding itself into the Western economic system the way Singapore did, Iran defined itself in opposition to it. That opposition creates constant friction. Every time tensions rise, oil markets react. Every time naval forces reposition, shipping costs change. Every time Iran signals it might disrupt Gulf traffic, global economies flinch. No war is necessary. The mere possibility reshapes behavior. That's structural leverage. Now add ideology. Since 1979, the Iranian political system has been built around resistance to American influence. That identity is not cosmetic. It is foundational. It shapes domestic legitimacy. It frames foreign policy. It limits how far leaders can compromise without appearing weak internally. On the other side, American political culture has hardened around distrust of Iran's regime, especially around its nuclear ambitions and regional interventions. So the standoff isn't just geopolitical, it's psychological. Each side views concession as vulnerability, and that's where the snap risk begins. Lee believed great powers fail when they mistake symptoms for causes. The nuclear program is a symptom. Sanctions are a response. Proxy networks are tactics. The cause is deeper. Two systems locked into opposing strategic identities, layered on top of one of the most sensitive geographic corridors in the world. That kind of configuration does not drift toward peace easily. It drifts toward escalation cycles. Here's how the pressure builds. The United States cannot ignore Iran's nuclear development. Allowing unchecked enrichment would alarm regional allies and undermine non-proliferation norms. Iran cannot abandon enrichment easily. It sees nuclear capability, or at least nuclear ambiguity, as deterrence against regime change and external pressure. So negotiations happen, they stall, they resume, they partially succeed, they collapse. Sanctions tighten, Iran adapts. It expands regional partnerships. It deepens asymmetric capabilities. It invests in drones, missiles, and proxy forces, not to win a conventional war, but to complicate one. This is not chaos, it's adaptation. And adaptation makes crises durable. Lee warned that the most dangerous confrontations are not between equals. They are between asymmetrical actors, where one side cannot win outright and the other cannot lose decisively. The United States has overwhelming military power, but a full invasion of Iran would be massively destabilizing. It could ignite regional war, it could disrupt global energy flows, it could pull in neighboring states, so Washington operates below the threshold of total war. Targeted strikes, naval patrols, sanctions, cyber operations, diplomatic channels. Iran does the same. Missile tests, proxy escalation, controlled provocations, diplomatic messaging. Each side calibrates carefully, but calibration has limits. When tension persists long enough, margins for error shrink. A naval miscalculation in the Gulf, a proxy strike that goes further than intended, an intelligence misread, an internal political crisis that shifts decision-making abruptly. Any one of these can push the system beyond its balancing point. And here's what makes this moment especially volatile. Iran is managing internal pressure as well. Economic strain, public unrest, elite factional competition. When regimes feel vulnerable internally, they often become less predictable externally. They cannot appear weak, they cannot concede easily, they may escalate to reinforce legitimacy. At the same time, US leadership faces domestic political pressures. Energy prices affect voters. Regional alliances demand reassurance. Political rivals demand toughness. So both governments are constrained. Neither has full flexibility. Lee Kuan Yew often argued that strategic discipline requires prioritization. The United States' long-term strategic competition is with China, but the Iran standoff consumes constant attention. Carrier groups deploy to the Gulf, diplomatic resources rotate through regional capitals, sanctions enforcement absorbs financial and legal bandwidth. Iran does not defeat America, it entangles it, and entanglement is draining. Over time, prolonged tension hardens positions. Moderates lose ground, hardliners gain influence, trust erodes further. The political space for compromise narrows. That's when systems snap, not because leaders wake up one morning wanting war, but because the structure offers no more stable equilibrium. Lee believed geography sets the stage, but human systems determine whether tension stabilizes or fractures. In the case of the US-Iran standoff, the geography is unforgiving. The Persian Gulf cannot be relocated. The Strait of Hormuz cannot be bypassed easily. Regional rivalries with Israel and Gulf states cannot be erased. Energy markets remain globally interconnected, so every flare-up carries global consequences. And the more often flare-ups occur, the more normalization of brinkmanship sets in. When brinkmanship becomes routine, risk perception dulls, and dulled risk perception is dangerous. The snap doesn't have to be a full-scale invasion. It could be cascading escalation, an exchange that expands beyond intention, a strike that triggers retaliation beyond expectation, a regional proxy war that spirals. Once escalation momentum builds, de-escalation becomes politically costly. Leaders fear appearing weak, allies fear abandonment, markets panic, and events move faster than policy. Lee Kuan Yew's core insight was that stability depends on clarity and realistic alignment of incentives. Right now, incentives are misaligned. The United States wants limits on nuclear development and regional aggression. Iran wants security guarantees and recognition of its regional role. Neither trusts the other enough to grant the foundational concession, so they circle. Pressure accumulates, and pressure accumulation is physics. It doesn't disappear because leaders wish it away. It builds, and eventually, either a new equilibrium forms or the system fractures. That is the warning. The US-Iran standoff is not static, it is elastic, and elasticity has limits. The snap may not be immediate, it may not be predictable in timing, but the longer structural tensions compound, geography, ideology, nuclear capability, regional rivalry, economic pressure, the narrower the corridor for stable management becomes. Lee understood that great powers often stumble, not because they are weak, but because they underestimate the rigidity of opposing systems. Iran is rigid, its political identity is entrenched, its geography is strategic, its deterrence model is asymmetrical but persistent. The United States is powerful, but power does not erase constraints. In fact, power sometimes creates them, because when you are the dominant global actor, you cannot ignore instability at choke points. You must respond. And constant response creates entanglement. The real danger isn't immediate collapse, it's accumulated strain. A standoff stretched too long across too many pressure points. At some stage, miscalculation becomes more probable than stability. And that's what it means for a confrontation to be about to snap. Not tomorrow, not necessarily next week, but structurally nearing the limits of sustainable tension. Lee Kuan Yew would have said this isn't about predicting a specific event. It's about recognizing when the architecture of conflict has become brittle. And right now, the architecture of the US-Iran standoff is rigid, overextended, and under constant stress. That's when history tends to move suddenly, not because someone intended it, but because the system could no longer hold.